I want to record a video for educational purposes to talk about the different stages of awakening, of enlightenment. And I made a video that was based on scientific research, so different locations. But this video I want to talk about experiential levels of enlightenment. And I made an enlightenment video I think 2 years ago. I want to tell you what happened since. So it's sort of beyond enlightenment, you could say. What those different states are and what in the end it comes to. And maybe that helps you get a sort of solid idea of what this is. If you're a meditation practitioner, if you're a seeker, if you're somebody that's really into spirituality, that's interested in enlightenment, that's in one of those traditions which are focused on basically getting results, not dabbling in powers or improving your spiritual ego. So anything you do to get better directly, right, is just an ego boost. So whether that's practicing some sort of ritual or ceremony or something to improve yourself, even though that's worthy, that's nice, it has nothing to do with enlightenment, which is about the dissolution of self. And self consists of different layers, and that's actually the layers that you want to dissolve. So I think layer 1 is basically the basic ego level, where we're unconscious, we're not really realizing what this is, and we're led by our mind. Our mind and us are just together, and we're led by that. And when you start meditating, or when you start getting some insights, maybe even through some plant medicine or some different things, which I'm a sensitive guy, so for me, I've always liked the subtle ways of meditation more, because they're helping you make a permanent shift, and it's not temporary. Even though you get temporary glimpses on the path, it just locks in all the way, while things like psychedelics or different other systems usually only give you a glimpse or a temporary experience. Mostly psychedelics, that is. But let's say you start meditating, at some point you sort of get a little bit of space through that meditation from your thoughts. Let's say these are your thoughts. You could say your ego, your identification with the thoughts are just locked in usually. But when we meditate or start meditating, we get a little bit of distance of that. And we're able to see, maybe in the moment we're meditating, that these are just thoughts, these are just ideas, these are just things that are coming up. And at some point we lock in to witness consciousness, where we know that we're not the body, we're not the mind, but it's just something happening. It's something we can observe, actually. This is witness consciousness. And then that witness consciousness, it makes it clear, like, okay, this is ego, you could say. These are just a bunch of thoughts, a bunch of ideas. And through that we can sort of slowly start to dissolve that. We also learn to live with that. We start to express it. We start to, with our thoughts and feelings, even though we understand that we're not the one that's always creating it, we're just witnessing it. And when we witness it more and more through meditation, at some point we empty out, you could say, a part of that sort of personhood, that separate feeling of I'm in the body, I'm the self like this. And dissolving that gives us access to, you could say, God consciousness or non-dual awareness. Meaning, when we dissolve the person, what is left is sort of everything. And everything is actually still a state. Because, or the feeling of God or creation or non-duality is still a state, because it's something where we realize that everything is one. Oneness is still a state, because we see that everything is sort of full everything is energy, you could say. And that energy has different qualities. It has both the emptiness quality as the fullness quality. It has both the God quality as sort of the nothing or the absolute quality. And so when we first realized this oneness state, so you could say this everything, this non-dual awareness is the first time we sort of are out of our shell of the body, we break out of that boundary and we feel we're free. And we can get on the path, we can get lots of glimpses of next stages. So when we do our meditation or our practices correctly, and when we sort of let go, in a way, of our resistance, because that's what the whole thing is about, then we can see, okay, this is what it is. Like, there's no self, there's no separate self at least, and we get into this state of flow with everything, with life. So that's the first enlightenment stage. And when I sort of, I'm saying I, but yeah, that's just a word. I am using words here. No word is correct, of course, so take these descriptions lightly, but these are my personal experiences, and they're not personal, you know what I mean? That's actually an aspect of reality. And what you start to see is, this is called third path in Buddhism out of 4. Or the end of third path, you could say the graduation from third path. And actually, because Buddhism is more about emptiness, while most of the religions are more about fullness. So it's the end of most religions is this third path. Because you realize non-duality, you realize oneness with everything. And that's when I made my enlightenment experience video, because 2 years ago that happened. Because it's not something, these states, it's like you can prepare with doing the right things, you could say, by doing your meditation, by letting go, by meeting the resistance, by being with what is, by surrendering, by doing some practices. By doing what comes up, by just living your life authentically, not resisting whatever wants to happen. But at some point, by doing that, you sort of get a bigger chance of becoming lucky to reach like these next states. Because it happens by grace, we could say. It's not that you can force these states into happening. But these are permanent shifts, right, we're talking about. So this permanent shift to everythingness. Then that is also, when that happened, I thought, this is it. I just need to integrate this, and that this is enlightenment and everything like that. And it was enlightenment, but there were still parts of reality that wanted to dissolve. So these parts of reality, actually there are 2 parts, you could say, 2 things, 2 separate states of reality to transcend. And one is the everythingness of non-dual awareness, and then 2 is the void or nothingness of reality. Both are aspects that you actually transcend or are able to let go. And again, this happens by grace, but this is different phases, you could say. So you see that not everybody goes through all these phases. There's a lot of people that reach a phase and then either stay there or think this is it and start talking from that, start preaching from that almost, and they don't go all the way. And whether that's that they're not willing to look inwards anymore, but their ego sort of claims enlightenment, because there is, even in this non-separate, non-self sort of state, like third path in Buddhism, like everythingness, fourth path in Buddhism, like nothingness, even in these states, there is still a sense of self. And it's not the limited sense of self with the body, but it's the big self, right? The big self, like the God self, like the nothingness self, like the energy self. There's still this, almost like the non-dual self. There's still this identification, you could also say, with that. And this identification is still a sense of self, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's still a phase in this. And if we don't transcend to the next phase or get glimpses of the next phase, we don't really know what that is, because it might not be meant for us. Maybe we're meant to stay in this everythingness phase or in this nothingness phase. But after the everything and the nothingness phase, actually we integrate both in normalcy. Because I spent 2 years in the everythingness phase, and then I spent almost 4 weeks in the nothingness phase before I sort of transitioned to the end. You could say a sort of mix of both, or I think nothing. Not everything, but it's just like Buddha says, the empty fullness. It's like this state which almost feels normal, because there's no, when I was in this everythingness, everything felt like this vast, beautiful, sort of unending thing, this oneness. I had this sense of oneness. It was actually nice. And then when I sort of transitioned to this nothingness, it was like void, and it was like really a sort of spacey feeling to life, and that was really cool. It was a nice feeling actually, but it was still like I just felt like a sort of mystical experience. It didn't feel like, I knew I wasn't there, right? I knew this was still a sensation. If you're feeling a sort of sensation, if you get a sensation from reality, and I'm not talking about bodily normal sensations, but I'm talking about this spiritual sensations. When you're still getting a sensation, you haven't gone full circle. So this everything and this nothingness, they come together, and it's basically reality falling away. You could also say it like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. When non-duality, when third path comes, when everythingness comes, when non-dual awareness comes, the self falls away, the small self. But then reality, or the big self, is still there, and that also falls away after the everythingness and the nothingness. And that's my experience, that's the experience of some of my teachers, which is really cool, but you feel sort of normal again. And then at some point, because still there might be a sort of sensation, there might still be a sort of kundalini thingy, there might still be some sort of solidity left. Who knows what that is? Maybe it's an idea, maybe it's anything else, could be anything. And at some point that also falls away, or that can also fall away. And when that falls away, and that could also fall away with this shift to normalcy, but when that also falls away, then you feel that there is nothing left of what you were. That the person you were before, in puberty, or before, that there is nothing left of that person. Nothing at all. That's weird as fuck. But also freeing. It's true that you die before you die. Because the ego, let's say when a part of the ego dissolves, when you get a little bit of the ego death, you could say, talked about that in my previous video, then you're like, this is good, because you get more space, more freedom, right? It feels like freer. And then when you lose more of that self, it's sort of the part of the ego that's left claims that and sort of thinks, I have all these space, I have so much relaxation, this is so nice. Maybe sort of it also turns on the spiritual process and actually claims the spiritual process. That's why you see all these people with these spiritual egos. It's not, and it doesn't have to be obvious, like, I've attained this and that, but it can be very subtle, like a sense of that there is still something which is noticing, which is something where you can reflect upon. There's still something that is claiming this freedom or claiming this emptiness. There's still a subtle layer of that ego left. That's actually very comfortable now with that freedom, which is extremely interesting. But when that the final piece drops of self, probably of big self. But when that piece drops, there's nothing left of what you were. Nothing at all. And I was freaked out for a second there. But it was also extremely cool. But there was a clear knowing, like this, there's nothing that remains. Like everything, when everything is sucked into the void, you could say, and when everything is emptied out, you know that. And then funny enough, when sort of this process we talked about, when the self is completely dissolved, even the everythingness and the nothingness and all that stuff, then still you get this sort of, how do I come down from the mountain? And there's no I that comes down from the mountain, right? You go up the mountain, but nobody comes down, even though it comes down. The body mind comes down, but it's emptied out. And how is that done? Right? That's still something that I'm not experienced with, because I'm living through that. But it's very interesting because there's nobody driving the car anymore. It's like a Tesla on autopilot, right? It does the driving perfectly by itself, but it's still strange. It's still a bit strange, but it's really cool though. And it's definitely, if I had no idea, let's say beginning this path, I had no idea what would happen. I had no orientation. You doubt yourself as well, because it takes, I meditated for 5 years before I had my first shift, and then I had like 7 years of no shifts happening, like maybe small but not big shifts. So you just chip away, and then I had 2 years in the everythingness phase. So like that's a lot of time that you spend towards this, but it's not that you know what's gonna happen. It's not that I felt like I had no choice. This just happened in my life. And if it's happening in yours, my advice would just be keep going. Keep doing what you're doing. And if practices are working for you, if you get insights, do those practices. Right? If something feels right, do that. Don't look all over the place. Just look where you're meant to look, right? There's no fancy, nobody can actually hold your hand through this whole thing, because even though you have a teacher, even though you have somebody that maybe advises you, or a guru, they can see, they can point, they can help, but you still do this, right? It's like somebody can help you lose weight or train you or coach you or whatever, but you need to still do the hill sprints, or you need to push the weights, or you need to build the business. You can have a coach, right? You can have somebody that's been there, but you need to do it. That's similar to this process. You do it, right? And then, like the teacher of Muji, Papaji, said, when you want to know the truth, you need to disappear. And when you disappear, there's this whole new phase of coming down the mountain. And who comes down the mountain, right? It's just done by itself. But in that process, funny enough, what you hear, or what the textbooks are, is like wake up, clean up, and grow up. And actually, that there is some cleaning up to do after this final awakening. So I'm very curious. Let's see what happens in this life. I will keep sharing from now and then. And happy to share it with you. Thanks for all the support, by the way. Thanks for watching. And much love to you. And if you have any questions about this process, what you're going through, just feel free to reach out on Instagram or schedule a free call with me in the link below, and we'll have a chat. And maybe I can guide you. Maybe I can ask one good question. Maybe I can help you. Maybe I can't. Let's see. And much love to you, wherever you are. And know that there's no spot in life that's worth more than another spot. Right? Let nobody be an authority to you. Right? You be your own judge. You be the authority. You trust your intuition over that of any teacher. You trust yourself. over everything. Don't put any teacher on a pedestal, right? Don't figuratively kiss their feet. Kiss your own feet first, because you are God, right? Enlightenment is basically the losing of resistance to what already is here. And resistance is also this. So there's nobody better than another person. If they have more money, if they have more spiritual, whatever, doesn't matter. If they have better clothes or a house, or who cares? They're you, you're them. Everybody plays their part. Every part is just as important. The fly, the mosquito, elephant, the plants, the microbes, the planets, they all play their part, just like us. We're live. Much love to you. Bye.